Hello CraftDee family, and welcome to another tutorial by She's So CraftDee. For today's DIY projects, we will be using these summer toys at the Dollar Tree to create some unique modern DIY decor pieces. Now, I had so much fun designing and creating these, and I hope you enjoy seeing what I came up with today. Now, I've chosen a rich wood color along with black accessories, but you can always customize these however you like. Now, as always, all of the projects I create have a complete supply list in the description box, so you can easily use it for reference as you gather up your supplies. Now, before we start, I have to say, hey to all of my subscribers, and if you're a new visitor to my channel today, I hope you consider subscribing as well, and stick around to enjoy these crafts and all the different ways I'll show you how to style these in your space. So now, let's jump right into the projects. Now, this project is a set of modern vases. Now, we're going to need 2 of these bat sets from the Dollar Tree. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to remove all of the bats from the netting, and we're going to set the balls to the side. We won't be using them in this project. Now, the first thing I decided to do with one of them is to create a design, and I want a diagonal design. So in order to help with my diagonal shape, I'm using a rubber band. By using the rubber band, it kind of sticks to the bat and stays in place. It works better than string, and then once I get it in place, I'm going to outline it with my little acrylic marker just to know where I need to cut it at. Now, I did just snatch that rubber band off, and it did smudge my line a little bit, but I am going back over it to make sure that I can see where my cutting line will be. Now, I'm cleaning up the little smudges with a wet cloth, and just to make sure everything is nice and neat. So here's my little diagonal line, and it looks perfect. I like the way that this turned out. Now, to cut this, you can use a utility blade to cut it. It'll cut easily through this Dollar Tree plastic, but I'm going to be using my hot knife. Now, if you guys don't have a hot knife in your crafting arsenal, definitely get one. I love using this thing. They're only about $14 or $15 on Amazon, and I'll link it in the description box below. So I'm using my hot knife to cut through the plastic. It cuts really quick and easy, and I'm just going to remove the part that I cut off, and now I have my beautiful diagonal design. So it's easy to go back through with the hot knife to trim off any of the shavings that were left behind or any of the little bits and pieces to make sure everything is nice and even. So here is my little diagonal vase design all cleaned up and ready to go. And we're going to clean up that top portion too. I originally was going to discard it, but I think I can make another little simple vase out of this piece as well. Now, for this third vase, I'm just going to cut it off right where the bottleneck starts to form, and this will create a unique and modern style vase. I know I've seen some of these on the higher end websites. I love this design as well. So now we have a group of 3. Now, in order for my middle vase to stand on its own, I'm going to add one of these little bowls from the Dollar Tree. It comes in a little party section in a 6-pack. I'm going to add this to the bottom of that little piece, and this will create a stand for that vase. Now, to adhere it, you could use E6000 or any other really heavy-duty glue. For this project, I am just going to be using my high-temperature hot glue. I'm going to add it to the bottom of that bat piece and then stick it right on top of the bottom of the bowl. That'll create the stand, and now you have a nice bond between the 2 pieces to make it one solid piece. So now that all my vase pieces are all put together, what I'm going to do is start preparing them to be painted. So I'm taking some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to just start sanding the vases. You don't want to really sand hard. I really want to rough up the surface just slightly so the paint that I use will give a nice smooth coat. Now, the paint that I'm using is compatible to plastic, but sanding just a little bit always helps it stick a little bit better. And you want to sand all of your vases, and then once they're all nice and sanded, clean them up with a cloth with alcohol. I remove all of the sanding dust, and it just gives you a nice, clean and lint-free finish when you get them all cleaned up. And now that these are all clean, I'm going to take them out and give them a couple coats of this satin black spray paint by Krylon. Now after drying for about 2 hours, here are the vase pieces. The finish on these turned out amazing. They really do look very high end. I really love how they turned out. So now all you have to do is really decorate them. And here are my vases all decked out with the assorted greenery, and I love how these turned out. Now I really do think that that satin paint gives these the perfect finish, and they really do look like they're ceramic or even a pottery style. Now of course you can just group these together or you can stage them apart. Either way, you have 3 beautiful designs to choose from for your space. Let me know what you think of this project in the comments below. Now this project is a set of modern wall sconces. Now for this one, we're going to need 2 of these ball pop toys from the Dollar Tree. And we're also going to need one of these wood grain signs from the Dollar Tree. And they used to have these in all kinds of different seasons. And I just got the one from Easter. Okay, we're going to take our ball pop toy. We're going to remove all of the materials from it and make sure you catch those balls. They'll just jump out of the package. Just set those to the side for now. Now, if you twist the handle, it'll remove itself from the top portion. We're not going to use the handle for this project, but we're going to use this little basket portion, and that's what I'm going to call it. So what we need to do is we need to close in the hole on the bottom of our little basket. So I'm using a piece of scrap foam board. So I'm just sitting that basket piece on top, and I'm tracing out this circle that is at the bottom, and I'm going to do this twice so I can cover up both of the bottoms of my holding baskets. And here it is on our foam board. Now I'm going to grab my Dollar Tree cutting mat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out my circles just using my utility knife. Now once those are all cut out, you have a nice little perfect circle. You can do some trimming up if you need to, but this is going to go inside of the basket. It won't be shown on the outside, and all its purpose is to cover up that hole so nothing falls through. So I'm doing a test fit here. It looks good, and now I'm just going to add some hot glue to the bottom of my circle, and then I'm going to stick it inside of my holding basket just to cover up that bottom hole, and there's a ledge inside that'll catch it so it doesn't fall through. And now you've done it for both of your holding baskets, and this part is done. So grab one of those balls, and you'll notice it has a seam down the middle. And again, I'm going to take my hot knife, or you can use a utility blade, and I am going to cut this ball right in half using the seam that's already on the ball. Now what I wanted to do with these balls is kind of form a finial to put on the bottom of my baskets just for a little decorative accent. So I'm going to take half of the ball and I'm going to sit it at the bottom. I'm just going to go ahead and add a circle of hot glue on the bottom of that foam board piece, and then I'm going to sit the ball right on top of that glue. Now once I do that for both of them, I'm also going to grab some of these beads. Now these are 20mm beads that I had in my stash. I'm going to add another squeeze of that hot glue gun, and I'm going to put that 20mm bead right on top of the ball. So what I'm trying to do is create a little staggered finial here, just a little design at the bottom to give it a little bit of an accent. So once everything is put together, just go ahead and give it a light sanding. Of course, we want to dull out that plastic, and then we definitely want to go and clean it up with the alcohol. Don't skip this step. It'll definitely affect your finish if you have dust or particles on your item. And then I'm going to give it a couple of coats of satin black spray paint. Now while that's sitting out to dry, what we're going to do is grab our sign. Now we're going to be cutting this sign down to 2 pieces for our sconce. So I'm going to take my metal ruler and I am going to cut across right below the bunny because we want to get the largest piece as possible. And this piece ended up being maybe about 18.5 to 19 inches. Now you can save your bunny part for another project, so go ahead and sit that one to the side. So now we're going to take our remaining piece, and I'm going to measure and make sure it's divided in half. And once we find that halfway point of the board, we're just going to make a mark, and I'm just doing a double check to make sure each half is going to be equal. Then taking your utility blade again, we're going to score it 3 or 4 times until it comes apart, and now you have 2 pieces for your sconces. Now I am going to end up staining these pieces for my sconces, but first I want to flip them over to the back side and add the hanging piece. Now for this, I'm only using a piece of jute twine with knots tied on each end, and then I'm going to hot glue each knot on the back, forming a little loop at the top, and then I want to make sure this is nice and secure with a heaping amount of glue on each knot. Now to cover those knots, I always like to take a piece of craft paper and I'll add some hot glue to the craft paper and I'll lay it over those knots. I just think that this gives it such a clean and professional finish, and so I'm going to cover those up and it just looks really nice and neat. And now that that first one is done, we're just going to repeat this process for the second one. And here are both backs of the sconces with those hanging pieces. Now is the fun part. We're going to get ready to stain them. Now you can use traditional stain, but today I'm going to be using Waverly Antique Wax. Now I'm just going to start adding the wax to each one of my boards, and I'm just going to work it in. Now I'm using a cloth, but you can definitely use a paintbrush or sponge brush, whatever you prefer. But I'm just working the stain into that wood grain really well, making sure you get the edges, and then definitely follow up with a paper towel when you're finished to remove all of that excess wax. Now once that first one is done, we want to repeat it for the second one, and now both of our boards are nice and stained, and we want to allow those to dry. So after a few hours, here are our little sconce baskets. They are nice and dry with our satin spray paint on there, and our boards are dry as well. We're going to be attaching each one of those sconce baskets onto the board, so I'm going to go ahead and lay them down and make sure they're nice and centered. Now I'm taking my pencil and marking the center of the board because I want to make sure they're in perfect alignment when I decide to adhere them. Now the initial way to adhere them is to add the hot glue right down the center of the back of the sconce. Now this is just to place it in place and hold it in place before I actually tack these down. Now I want to do this for both of them. You want to place them side by side when working. That way you'll know each one of them are evenly placed on their boards. So here are both of them on their boards ready to go, and to finally adhere them, I am following up with my staple gun. I am going to apply 2 staples to the center of that sconce. It goes all the way through to the back, but it doesn't penetrate through, so it is a perfect size staple for this wood. So you want to repeat this for both of them, and then once that's done, you can follow up with a little bit of black acrylic paint to cover the heads of the staples if you wish, but if you put greenery in these, you really won't notice, so it's just a matter of preference. And then once that dries, all you have to do is find out how you want to decorate and display them. And here are my sconces. I've added my greenery, and these turned out so beautiful. Now I think that these have such a modern industrial feel to them, and if you're not crazy about the greenery, you can add battery candles or even lights to these pieces as well. Now I love all the little details, the little half ball and the beads at the bottom just give it a nice little touch at the end. I hope you all give this really easy project a try too. Now this project is a modern style mirror. I'm going to need one of these large flying discs from the Dollar Tree. And I'm also going to need one of these mirrors from the Dollar Tree. We're going to start with working with the disc, so go ahead and remove it from the package. We're going to only use the disc portion and not the tray portion. Now this is a nice large size disc. I love the little hole pattern on here, but I wanted to do a mirror. Now the mirror that I had on hand was actually bigger than I thought, so it kind of changed my plans a little bit, but we are going to be painting this first. So I'm going to go ahead and lightly sand the surface, of course, to remove that gloss so we can go ahead and paint it. Just make sure it's cleaned very well after you sand, and then you can go ahead and paint it. I'm using my satin black paint by Krylon. Now here it is, it's set outside, it's nice and dry. We didn't need to paint the center since it would be covered by the mirror, but we wanted to make sure we got the outsides really well. My initial design, actually, I was planning on weaving nautical rope around the holes to create a really neat design, but since my mirror was larger than I expected, I kind of changed up my plans just a little bit. When I laid the mirror on top, not all the holes that I wanted to be displayed were showing, but there's still holes around it that still give it that really modern kind of industrial type look that I love. So we are going to work with this to make it come together. So what I decided to do instead was to use some brown beads. Now, I got these beads on clearance from Walmart around Christmas. As you know, Walmart sells the beaded garland, and when it goes on clearance, I just cut the garland apart and use the beads, or you can stain your own beads if you like. Now, I'm going to string these beads together. I'm using this little plastic needle that I keep on hand for like yarn and large threads. So I'm just going to thread it with some Dollar Tree black yarn, and then I'm going to add one bead to the end of the strand and tie it in there just to make sure the rest of my beads don't fall off the string. So once that bead's in place, I'm just going to start feeding my beads onto the needle. This is the perfect size needle for this. I actually have had this on hand for years since I do sew, but you could probably get this from any kind of fabric or craft store. So once you have enough beads, you're going to cut your string down to size, and then you're going to cut tie the ends of the beads together. I usually tie 3 or 4 knots. I'm going to trim it down, but I'm going to leave a nice 2-inch tail because I am going to rethread my needle once again, and then I'm going to feed that needle back through the beads again just to make sure that tail is nestled inside of the bead so you don't see it. So now it looks like you have one complete strand and you don't see any knots in the string. So now we can start putting everything together. So I'm going to start with adding my mirror to my disc. So I'm adding a nice thick bead of my glue to the back all the way around, and make sure when you place it on your disc that it's nice and centered and an equal amount of those holes on the disc are displayed around it. And now you can add your bead trim around it. We've already cut it to fit, so it should fit nice and snug around the mirror. Now to secure this, you can hot glue it down, but I prefer to actually repurpose these and use these beads again, because we all know beads can be expensive sometimes. So we're going to find a way to add this without actually having to add tons of hot glue to it. So I'm taping it down to the disc, as you see here with painter's tape, and I'm going to flip it over, and this is where that whole pattern comes into play. I'm again going to thread my little plastic needle, and I'm going down and up through one of the holes on each one of those little clusters. Each one I'm going down and up through, and I am securing those beads all the way around. So this is so simple and easy, just going down around the bead and up, and as you can see, it has grabbed onto that strand of beads all the way around, and now all you have to do is cut your strand down and then just tie it in a little bow or a knot on the back, so you'll be able to take it apart or remove it as you wish. I love the fact that things can be interchangeable and swapped out, and you can save on your materials with my DIYs. So now just flip it back over. You could take off that painter's tape, and your beads are nice and secure to your disc. They're not going anywhere. So now the final step is to add a hanger. So to add a hanger, I just wanted to kind of put some string through those holes. So I'm again threading my little needle, and I'm just going to thread that needle through. I'm going to go straight across, and I needed a little assistance from my needle nose pliers to pull it through the other side because it's really tight fit in there. But once that string is threaded through, all you have to do is to tie those ends together into a loop, and now you have a hang loop for your mirror. You just trim down those pieces of string, and now you have that little loop at the top as shown here. This will be easy to place on a hook or a nail in the wall to display it. And here it is. You have a beautiful mirror that you can use and display in your space. Now, I absolutely love the black finish with the stained wood beads, and it really looks great. And I love that these beads can be interchangeable. Swapping out things and making things your own is so fun when it comes to DIYs. Now, you can make one or even more for a wall collage, and that'll be awesome. You all have to let me know what you think about this project in the comments below. Now, this project is a modern style shelf piece. We're going to need 2 of these slingshot toys from the Dollar Tree. And we're going to need 1 of these wood grain signs from the Dollar Tree. We're going to start with the slingshot toys. First, we're going to remove those from the package and then cut off the little slingshot portion of the toy piece. So you can see here, all we're left was the frame, the little Y shape, and we'll be using this part in our project today. So we're going to go ahead and sand all of that down really lightly and then clean it up because we will be painting these black. And I'll be using my black satin by Krylon. So while those are out there to dry, we are going to start to form the shape with our board. Now for our board, I wanted it to be about 18 inches long. So I measured at 18 inches and then took my metal ruler there, made a mark, and then I'll be cutting this off with my utility blade. Now we're going to put our rabbit piece to the side, and now we have an 18-inch board. Now as you can see, it's not as straight and not as firm as we would like it, so we are going to be reinforcing this, and I'm using a leftover 5-gallon paint stir stick that I have from a previous project. This should give it plenty of firmness that you need to actually display your items on in your project. Now you can attach this with your wood hot glue or wood glue, and you're just going to run a bead down the center of that 5-gallon paint stir stick, and this one's cut at about 17.5 inches, and then we're going to press it down the center of the underneath of the board, and as you can see, it's a lot more firm and rigid now, and we're going to be able to use it in our project. So now what we're going to do is we're going to measure in 2 inches from each side because this is where we'll be putting the legs for our shelf piece. Now initially I thought about gluing these on, but I just wasn't really confident that it would last, and you know I love to provide you guys with quality projects, so I will be adding screws to this project. So I want to go ahead and screw a hole, a pilot hole, into those 2-inch marks that I made on the board, so it goes right through that supportive stick on the back. And I also am using a couple cuts left over of the Dollar Tree plunger handle. Now these are cut at 3.5 inches, but you'll see later in the project I'll actually have to cut them down to 2 inches. So cut them at 2 inches for now for this project. Now what I'm going to do with these pieces is I am going to add my wood hot glue, and I am going to glue one of those pieces over each one of the pilot holes on the bottom of our shelf piece. Now this will help keep our legs in place and provide a little bit of support and stability. So we're going to, once those are adhered, flip it over, and we're going to run our drill right back through so it goes down into those Dollar Tree plunger pieces. And I'm using a 7/64 inch drill bit. Now I am going to be adding screws through the top, and I'm using a 1 1/4 inch wood screw. Now I'm just going to screw these down into that Dollar Tree plunger handle piece that's under the bottom. Now these should be screwed in. They're going to be nice and flush, and so they will blend into the final finish and they won't get in the way of anything that you place on your shelf. So now that this much of the project is already assembled, we can go ahead and stain all of this because these are all the wood pieces that we'll be using in this project. So again, I'm going to be using my Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm going to be applying it all over the piece starting at the bottom, making sure you apply, then wipe away with your paper towel, and do the same thing for the top of the shelf. So as you can see here, the color blends in really well. Really beautiful color on this wood, so it looks great. You don't really need to stain the little pegs because they will be covered up with your slingshot pieces. So I've set the piece out to dry a little bit and it's ready to go. And I've also gone out and grabbed my slingshot pieces for the legs. Now these slingshot pieces will actually be sliding over those little pegs that we have on the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to take our hot knife and we are going to be cutting a hole in that bottom handle portion. Now my expectation was that this handle was going to be hollow on the inside, but there is some supportive brackets inside there. That's where this tool comes in handy because it cuts right through all of that plastic, therefore, and you'll be able to actually clear the path so you can insert it over your little peg at the bottom of your shelf. Now initially I cut mine at 3.5 inches, but it was too long, so as you can see it doesn't go down flush against the shelf. There's a little gap there. So when I took my ruler, I measured, it's about a 1-inch gap. So that's why I ended up and suggested that you cut it 2 inches. You cut it 2 inches instead because I think that will work perfect for this project. So I'm just going to mark and cut off the excess I don't need. I'm just using my jigsaw really quick to cut that off. It doesn't have to be perfect since it's going to be inside those little legs. So I went ahead and cut a hole in both of my slingshot pieces at the bottom, and now I can slide them right over that peg. Now to adhere these, I am squeezing probably 8 to 10 pumps of hot glue inside the leg and then pressing it onto the peg. What happens is when you put that glue in there, it'll run down onto the board and onto the connection and secure it all in place, and you want to do that for both legs. Now once both legs are nice and adhered, you want to touch it up with a little bit of paint. Now I'm using some black acrylic paint here. Now this acrylic paint does dry in a matte finish, so you do want to make sure that when it does dry that you touch it up with some satin finish, and I'm using some satin Mod Podge over there just so the color blends in really well. And here is the shelf all put together. The Mod Podge has dried, and now your shelf is ready to decorate. Now as an option, if you have an additional bunny shelf, you can stain that and add that to the bottom as well. And I was just showing here as an example how it would look if you were to do that. Totally optional, but it would definitely work. But now you could go ahead and decorate your single shelf. And there you have it, you guys, a beautiful modern shelf for your space. Now the wood sign from the Dollar Tree is perfect when reinforced, and it takes the stain so very well. Now I love the design of the legs too. Such a cool way to use those slingshot toys. Now all of the toys for these DIYs were so fun and interesting to work with today, and I hope that I've inspired you to work and think outside the box as well. Now I really do love each of these, but let me know in the comments which one of these projects was your absolute favorite today. Listen, if you love DIYs on a budget, please give this video a thumbs up and share this video with your friends. Make sure that you're following She's So Crafty EE on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest for the latest news, sneak peeks, and giveaways. If you like videos like these and you don't want to miss the next one, make sure you're subscribed by clicking that subscribe button below, or just click on my She's So Crafty logo on your screen and make sure you hit that bell to be notified when the next DIY goes live. It's absolutely free. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.